Good evening, and you are welcome to another exclusive interview powered by NewsBand Television. Now, recently, we have been hearing about the Anti-grazing Bill championed by the Southern Governors Forum to place a ban on the open grazing bill that allows the cattle rearers to take food wherever they find it fit. This will be the basis of our today's discussion as we look at the anti-grazing bill, the pros, the cons, and the controversies surrounding the policy. I am Augusta Neka. And here as our guest today, we have the president, Eculaw Group founder and CEO, Due Process Advocate, DPA International Foundation, Mr. Emeka Ugwuonye. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
And we are also expecting the National Organizing Secretary of the Social Change Initiative, Comrade Sani Saeed. We hope that you'll be able to join us in the course of this program. Let's start with you, Mr. Ugwuonye. Can you just give us a background to this anti-grazing bill? Although I've done a little bit of it, but I'm sure you have better analysis for what this anti-grazing bill is about.
As a way of a background, in recent times, there had been mounting bloody clashes between cattle rearers and various indigenous communities in Nigeria. It became so bad to unprecedented levels, and lives are being lost in thousands and tens of thousands, destabilizing the country in a massive way. It reached a point of extreme outcry, such that the governments of the southern states or the certain states in Nigeria had to take a position to stop the violence. And the consensus among these governors is that the best way to stop this violence is to stop open grazing. Open grazing, by definition, is actually a practice done in Nigeria whereby cattle rearers move their cattle in herds from place to place unrestrained. They were able to touch various farms and public areas, causing conflict, bloody conflict between them and farmers in various localities, and spreading essentially across the country to a point where it became intolerable. So the open grazing is that practice that has become so abhorrible and terrible and the cause of massive violence. The anti-open grazing movement, on the other hand, is the measure taken by the affected communities and their governments, state governments, to stop the violence by way of stopping the free and unrestrained movement of cattle rearers with their cattle in herds across state lines all over Nigeria. So it is, we now call it a movement because it splits the country into two. The northern states seem to be satisfied with open grazing arrangements. Maybe they could afford it because they have massive land spaces in the northern states. However, in the middle belt, it had reached its worst peak. So even if we talk about southern states, it's important to observe that southern states in the middle belt had actually taken the initiative to stop open grazing. So it has now become an engulfing movement on the part of several states in the southern Nigeria to prevent the movement of herds, the movement of cattle in herds across state lines. And that is now emerging or reflecting itself in this policy is reflecting itself in forms of various state laws meant to ban open grazing. As I speak to you, the latest news is that Lagos State has signed an anti-open grazing bill into law. So that is the latest state that has done so. Others have done as well. Enugu did as well. So because these southern states had agreed actually that by the end of September, they will all, by the end of August or September, they will come to unanimity in terms of having various state laws that prohibits the free movement of cattle. That is what is happening. And I believe in tonight's discussion, we will be looking to the consequences, the controversies surrounding this, the arguments on both sides of the aisle on the issue.
Thank you very much. Now, one of the things we are going to be looking at is the statements from Miati Allah. They said that if Lagos State should go ahead and sign the anti-grazing bill, the anti-open grazing bill, it's going to make the prices of cows and, in consequence, beef go up to 2 million naira, which is saying that they do not have the resources to carry out the ranching that this anti-grazing is talking about. Now, do you think, in your opinion, do you think that the governors, before signing this bill, they should have made provisions for the cattle rearers to practice ranching system?
Well, I don't see it that way, really. These governors are faced with grave emergencies. If you look at how this crisis had built up, it is essentially because the federal government failed to come up with a realistic and acceptable policy on this grazing issue. It led to a point where it appeared that the federal government and the governors of the southern states are at loggerheads. So in that when it comes to finding a lasting, well-coordinated policy, a uniform system of a uniform regime to address the issue, that should have been the responsibility of the federal government. Unfortunately, the federal government had lagged behind in terms of finding a solution to this. That forced these state governments to do something drastic and a bit radical. So it's not surprising that each state government might not have been able to conduct a comprehensive study of the effect of these banning across state borders. By the nature of things, these governors are responsible for their states. They think in the context of their state, they operate within their state borders. So when you have something of common interest that spreads across state lines, you would expect the federal government to be the most appropriate agency for intervention, for a sense of direction. Unfortunately, the Nigerian federal government had actually played a very terrible role in developing and finding a solution to this. So I don't blame the governors. However, we must accept that the policies of the government or the state government can never be adequate because they are trying to use state legislation, state policies, and state measures or regulation to address a subject matter that is of national dimension in terms of scope and space. So the statement of Mayatala regarding the value of the increase in the price of beef may very well be the case. But even if it's so, it leaves the governors to still make a very drastic choice of the price of beef or consumption of beef and the lives of human beings. So even if the prices of the price of beef, a cow, becomes 10 million naira, I don't think it will be sufficient for the governors to fold their arms and allow the carnage which has been going on to continue. So it's a very delicate thing. The economic argument as to the price of beef may very well be valid, but it could be something that is going to be short-lived. Let me say this. Once you disrupt in any significant way the supply of any product or any good, once you increase the cost of supply of those goods, it will affect prices in the market. That is what basic economics teaches us. In the past, the cattle rearers were able to move their cattle as they like. So they move these cattle across highways, across farmlands, and move them to wherever the the cow could be consumed. In that case, the cost of movement of this cattle appeared cheap. And if they appear cheap, it will reflect in the ultimate price of the cows. However, if on the other hand, the anti-open grazing regime now in place forces these people to use trucks trailers to move their cattle, it means that the cost of moving this cattle will go up, really. Because instead of this cattle feeding on the way, feeding on people's farms and going on, they will be in vans, in trucks and trailers, and certainly that would be an expensive way to move them. However, as I said, compared to the cost of what is going on, human life, the instability, the harm and destruction of farmland across the southern states of Nigeria, these governors will have no choice. So let the price of cow be 1 million, okay? And Mayatala doesn't have control over these market forces. If the price of cows becomes unaffordable, people will move to fish for protein and move to chicken for protein. So ultimately, Mayatala may be the loser. So let it not be perceived that Mayatala is threatening people with hike in prices. As we know in economics, if the price goes beyond a particular level, the consumers, the demand will respond to it. And ultimately, it may not be in the interest of the supplier to hike the prices as much as he wants. That's what I feel about it. It's a very dicey subject matter. We cannot fault the governors, even if the prices of beef cow would go up.
Okay, so you mentioned something in your current analysis. You were talking about how the federal government policy overshadows or is more powerful than the state legislation. Can you expatiate on that? Do you think that there will be any situation where the government open grazing bill will ever is already conflicting, would ever overshadow the anti-grazing bill?
Of the federal government? Yes. We are dealing with a constitutional issue here. It's essential. If you look at Nigerian constitution, we believe that both the states and the federal government can legislate on this subject matter. So it falls within what we call concurrent legislative list. So if that is the case, the federal government can actually oust state legislation by enacting a law on the subject matter. But unfortunately, the federal government has not taken that initiative, speaking from a constitutional lawmaking process. However, we can extend it to a political question, which is that the subject matter of rearing of cattle and grazing all over Nigeria is something that goes beyond one state. It is difficult for one state, therefore, or for individual states to be expected to find a lasting solution that could help everybody. It is very difficult. In fact, if you look at the calculations of some of the governors, you will understand the dynamics and confusion surrounding these things. Let me give you an example. I was listening to the speech of the governor of Lagos State when he signed the anti-open grazing bill. Lagos is in a unique position. Lagos does not have a lot of unoccupied land where cattle could go. So that's why Lagos has not been as ravaged by cattle rearing, the herdsmen activities or the clashes between herdsmen and farmers. Lagos doesn't have that sort of land. Lagos land is significantly occupied by buildings that are built up. But Lagos still had to sign this law, even sign this bill into law, even though this is not has not been a serious problem for Lagos. But the reasoning of Lagos state government captured in the speech of the governor was, if Lagos does not have an anti-open grazing bill, and Ogun State has one, and Ondo State has one, that is going to force the herdsmen in Ogun State and Ondo State to move into Lagos as a place of refuge. Because if open grazing is outlawed in Ondo and outlawed in Ogun State, but not outlawed in Lagos, a rational behavior of a herdsman is to move his cattle to Lagos where it is not against the law. That will put Lagos under a needless and unprecedented pressure of herdsmen presence and herdsmen disruptive activities. So Lagos was passing this law because other states are passing the law. Lagos is trying to protect itself against what will be the fallout of neighboring states passing that law. So again, it reflects the fact that this is not a problem that could be adequately addressed at state level. The federal government ought to have given us a comprehensive regime, a set of rules that will apply across the country or across a section of the country. It is extremely expensive, really, both in terms of legislative energy and in terms of political time and in terms of financial resources for these states, 12 states of southern Nigeria, enacting the same law. That means that 12 legislative houses are sitting, debating the same issue, recycling the same process. What a waste. It would have taken the National Assembly to make one law that could address all these things. So you don't have a situation where each state is worried about what happens in neighboring state. And then, of course, you can consider the political ramifications of these laws. Let me give you an example. If any of the southern states fails to enact anti-open grazing law, that could spell political tragedy for the governor in office. In fact, even if a governor has a solution or a different idea of how to tackle the menace of herdsmen, there'll be pressure on the part of every governor to follow orders, to do like others. If you don't, in other words, if Imo State doesn't do like Abia State and Anambra State, the governor of Imo State could be accused. The same thing with other states. So we are dealing with a very unfortunate development. And this is caused by the failure of the federal government to play the part it ought to play as the coordinating entity, the coordinating legislative authority across the border, across the country, on something of tremendous importance, such as the issue of safety and security and safety of lives and the violence and disruptions caused by herdsmen. So it's very important. And if I may go back to the issue of the price of the beef, the price of beef may go to 1 million, cow may go to 1 million. But the fact is that the activities of the herdsmen are causing the price of gari and the price of cassava to go up. Why? Because the herdsmen presence has been preventing the farmers in Ondo State, the farmers in Ogun State, the farmers in Enugu State, the farmers in Akwa Ibom State from going to farm to cultivate maize. As a result of the danger of famine or danger in famine, prices of food has gone up. So something is going to go up. So on the other hand, if you ban open grazing and make sure that herdsmen are not roaming around in our states or in farmlands, then farmers can return to the farms. And if they return to the farms, then the prices of gari and prices of beans and prices of tomato, prices of other things will come down. After all, we're not going to survive on beef alone. Not everybody eats beef. I don't eat beef, by the way. But I do eat beans, and I do like tomatoes. So either way, it's going to be a problem as long as the federal government does not step in and find a lasting solution for the whole country.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. Let us introduce our second guest, the National Organizing Secretary of the Social Change Initiative, Comrade Sani Saidu Mohammed. Comrade Mohammed, you're there, right?
Yes, I'm with you.
Okay, so you've been listening to the discussion so far. What is your take on the anti-open grazing bill?
Okay, thank you for this wonderful opportunity. I have listened to the erudite barrister Emeka. Indeed, she has done justice to some part of the conversation. However, I would like to take us a little back to history of the world in terms of the herders. The herders everywhere in the world, including Europe and Asia, were known to be roaming the town and street from one village to another, from one city to another. That was their culture in most of the countries in the world at the past. However, those countries didn't introduce any form of bill to ban the grazing. What they did was to reform grazing bill and introduce a modernized cattle ranching system. This is the standard in every country of the world. So I see no reason why some states will introduce a bill to ban, grazing. This bill is not specifying the areas to be banned, but entirely to ban grazing. That's what we are talking of, based on the theme of this conversation. So I am opposing that bill automatically. What we need to be thinking at this point in time is a reformed grazing bill, a bill that will allow these herders to establish a modern ranching system, or the government should provide one where the herders can go and hire or pay taxes for using it. This should be the standard or the yardstick. Now, if we are to think critically on this subject matter, we realize that majority of the people practicing this occupation, that's herding, are from one ethnic group in the country. So it will feel as if these people are denied of their source of living. In that situation, you are exposing them to so many criminal activities by disallowing them to practice their occupation or profession. What they are practicing is legally accepted and backed by the law. They are not selling illicit substances. They are not doing anything illegally. And some states are introducing a bill to ban their economic activity, which is the backbone of their existence.
Okay, thank you so much, Comrade Mohammed.
I'm not saying
just before we go further, can you adjust your camera so it's in a horizontal position rather than the vertical position that it currently is? Okay.
No.
Just turn your phone. Yes, this is better. Thank you so much. Now, before I move to our first guest, let me ask you this. You said that the herders are not breaking any laws and practicing their economy.
I didn't say that.
Okay, please correct.
I am opposing the anti-grazing bill. What I am suggesting in place of that is a reformed grazing bill. We should allow these herders as Nigerians.
Okay, so I'm going to ask for clarification on what you mean by a reformed grazing bill. Please clarify your stance on that. Clarify what exactly that entails.
What it entails is that these herders, as Nigerians as they are, they should be allowed to establish modernized cattle ranches in states where they deem it fit. In a situation whereby they cannot do that, the government should establish ones for them, just like government establish markets and rent shops to people and collect rent on monthly or yearly basis. Such can also be done to the cattle rearers. That
so
is
you're
justice.
Talking of ranching. That's what you're talking about.
Yes.
You're talking of ranching. So you're in support of ranching.
Yes, I am. But the anti-grazing bill is stopping anything grazing, and cattle ranching is part of grazing as well. Now,
Okay, we'll come
what
back
the
to this, but let
barrister
me,
says something. She
Comrade
said,
Mohammed,
okay,
we'll come back to this, but let me invite the public to participate in this conversation. Remember that you can participate in this conversation simply by raising up your digital hand, and we'll try to accommodate as much question and comments as possible.
but the time given to me is limited
No,
compared
well,
to.
we're still on you, Comrade Mohammed. Comrade Mohammed.
Yes, you
Comrade
said you are going
Mohammed,
to
I'm
give others the
listening to
chance
you.
to also speak.
Comrade Mohammed, I'm listening to you, and I want to ask you a question. The
Okay.
anti-open grazing bill allows ranching. I don't know if
Okay.
you're aware of that.
Okay.
Are you aware that the anti-open grazing bill allows ranching?
Okay. Okay.
So,
If it allows ranching, that is fine and good. But based on the theme of this our conversation, it speaks physically on anti-grazing. And when you said anti-grazing, it conceptually means that anything that has to do with grazing is banned. So that's why I am totally against that. But in a situation whereby it is only open grazing that is banned, we are currently in the 21st century. And why should we allow open grazing? But now, before directly implementing that bill, we should make provisions for these ranchers in a situation whereby all the states implement the anti-open grazing bill. What will become of these cattle rearers? Because most of them might not have enough resources to establish the modern cattle ranching system. So we should think fairly and do justice to these people. We should think of establishing one or two, ranching system, modernized cattle ranching system for these people, just to be fair to them. Where all the states, and I repeat, where all the states, not only the southern states or the eastern states, decided to implement that bill, rationally, what will become of these people? This is my question.
thank you. Thank
If
you.
I
Thank
may,
you so much. Thank you so much, Comrade Mohammed. Yes, please go ahead.
yeah, well, I think Comrade Mohammed has made a very valid point. And I am happy that in the course of this discussion, an issue has been clarified. Yes, the topic here, as captured for tonight, says anti-grazing bill. But it's being clarified now that what we are talking about is anti-open grazing bill. It's not possible, or it's not even reasonable, and hasn't been the case, to completely ban grazing. What is being banned is the places and areas where grazing is done. It's no longer going to be free for any herdsman to go anywhere he likes, including farmland. He is now restricted to the areas he could go, like any other business in this world. There's no other business where a businessman can enter into any land, any space, without limitation. So that's been clarified. And I believe that the comrade is not, from what I heard him say tonight, he's not encouraging the idea that herders can just enter into a farmland and eat up the crops and move on. No, that's not what he's saying. The point he said that I would like to emphasize, because I think it's very important, is the anti-grazing bill and anti-open grazing bills being signed into law in this state is being done in a poorly coordinated manner. It is being done in a way that could really not make sense. For instance, the dates in which these laws are coming into force are not exactly the same. So a herder could be trapped with his cows in a piece of land, and all of a sudden the lands, the states around him now have anti-open grazing bill. How can he move his herd, his cattle? It's a very cumbersome process. Also, establishing ranches, establishing restricted areas where these cows could graze is not an easy thing. These herders must need some assistance from governments. They must need, whatever we think and feel today, these laws are being enacted in a manner that is completely disruptive and very difficult to implement. Because ultimately, if you arrest 200 herders in Enugu State, then what are you going to do? Imprison them? That is going to cause an outcry and look like a persecution of a people of a particular ethnic group. So there ought to be a coordination. I agree with Mohammed on that. There ought to be coordination. There ought to be support, government support for the people affected, really. So also at the same time, and this is probably what Mohammed was saying in a different way, this matter ought not to be left for states. Because if you leave it for the states to handle, they will handle it in very conflicting, disruptive, different ways that could become even contradictory. It is a general problem, a nationwide problem. It calls for a nationwide solution, a uniform system of regime that will apply from one state to the other, regardless of the state you are in. There's also supposed to be a period, transition period, because of herdsmen. Okay, let me give you an example. Herdsmen are in Delta State with, let's say, 500 cows. And tonight, said Delta State signs it into law, says it's criminal to move your cows around without truck. These people are not even in anywhere that the truck could enter. They're far away in wilderness and the bushes. How would they get from the bushes to the roads where they could load their cattle into the trucks? So there ought to be a better coordination, a uniform system of operation. We don't have it. What we have is disruptive. What we have is difficult to implement. And when you pass a law that is difficult to implement, you are going to have a large number of violators, which stretches the capacity of the state to enforce the law. And when too many people violate the law, it ultimately renders the law ineffective, really, because you're not going to put thousands of people in prison or destroy thousands of cattle. So we got to think deeply. But I blame the federal government for sleeping on duty, for sitting on its arms and allowing this crisis to fester and become a problem for individual communities and individual states. I see what the states are doing in the South ultimately as a strong message to the federal government that they have to enter into this field and legislate in this field in a way that can provide a lasting and enduring solution.
Okay, I can see one of the participants' hand up, Samuel Ode Godwin. Samuel, please go ahead.
Good evening.
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Thank you very much for the first speaker and the second speaker. My own contribution to the topic of discussion.
Samuel, I'll ask you to speak up. We cannot hear you.
I can't hear him, please.
Samuel, please speak up.
As a my contribution to the topic of discussion, like the first speaker rightly said, the federal government, in my opinion, is deliberate not to talk about this issue. And until they put every machinery in place to talk about it and to make it a law that these herders should herd their cattle on the streets like we see in some states. It is really out of place and uncivilized for a country like Nigeria to allow those cattle on our streets. The federal government has spoken about it long before now, and they are quiet about it, or some states will not even take it. And that's why you see some states pass it as a bill, not even accept it. But the government has every right to see that this issue is being resolved. Otherwise, it will lead to a creative problem that will be very difficult for even the government to fulfill. So my take on this, the federal government to put every machinery in place, even in educating these cattle headers. Because in every state we put them, like the state, we have a state. Of course, economic importance to our nation, but we shouldn't allow the fact that they will just graze on our lands, on our streets, and thereby making a country as developed as Nigeria where it is. The government needs to come to place and to stop the issue that we have.
Mr. Samuel, we can barely hear you. Okay, I think we lost him. Let us let Comrade Mohammed react to that. Comrade Mohammed.
Yes, okay. Thank you very much. You see, I believe that even the government is not happy with the current way and manner in which the cattle roam our streets. It is highly disgracing seeing cattle roaming the street. So I don't also buy to that idea of allowing open grazing. I strongly disagree with that. But what I am suggesting is that we should have a system that can co-opt, this street cattle rearers. We should have system that will establish ranches where necessary for this cattle rearers. Now, there is this issue of on the economic side, as discussed by Barrister Emeka, that probably when the price is high, so many people might not buy that product. But that law is not applicable here in Nigeria, the law of demand, which she narrates. Just look at I can cite so many examples. In Nigeria, it is even when the price increases that people rush to buy that product. People don't refuse to buy a product just because its price is high. You can see the price of petroleum, it keeps increasing, yet people keep demanding for it more. However, the poor masses are suffering for it. So also it's applicable to the cattle. When these prices rise, people will still buy it at cheaper price, but it will make those people uncomfortable. So the government should establish these modernized ranches everywhere. It is possible. Nigeria has the resources, just as it produces market, it establishes market. It can establish these ranches everywhere across the nation. Also, the bill is coming from state. All these bills were sponsored by State House of Assemblies. I'm yet to find any bill that is sponsored by either the Senate or National House of Assembly. I don't know if Barrister Emeka knows any, but I am here to do that. I am here to, get to know about that. So I am asking, why is it that our senators are not willing to sponsor such bill? Although the government might have lackadaisical attitude in implementing such important bills, such vital bill that affect the normal, the ordinary Nigerian. But effort should be put in place before we blame the government. You will have so many people accusing the federal government of supporting open grazing bill, and I've never heard of that. where the government endorses open grazing on the street, on our roads. I have never heard of that. Just that our government lacks the wherewithal to establish ranches due to their selfish interest.
Comrade Mohammed, let me interject here. When you were making your initial submission, you said that the culture of these cattle rearers is to move from one place to another. So how sure are you that even if ranching is introduced, they would accept it and comply with that law and even pay tax like you suggest?
Yes, that's just going by the history. So if other countries can adopt that system and it works for them, so why not Nigeria? Let's give it a try. Already, there are so many influential Nigerians that are into cattle ranching. If you are going by the road from Abuja to Kaduna or to Kano, you come across a lot of cattle ranches on the roads. So this is to tell you that already we are moving there. So it's left for the government to support the system if we want it fully implemented across the nation.
But, so you're saying, Comrade Mohammed, so you're saying that the government, the federal government now, should ban open grazing and implement anti-open grazing that supports ranching. That's what you're saying.
Of course, yes. That is what any reasonable Nigerian should start thinking of. We are currently in the 21st century, so everything has to be modernized to suit the century. So that's my take on that. I strongly, propose that.
Okay, let us hear from
we are even currently working.
Barrister Ugwuonye. Barrister, are you there?
I'm here.
You heard what the last speaker said and also what the participant said. What's your take?
Well, the last speaker, I didn't quite hear what he said because of either a network problem. But what Mohammed said that is of interest to me, or rather that I must comment, is he sounds very sober in his comment, because one problem we've had in the past when it comes to discussing this subject is that people allow emotions to get the better of them, and that hinders our ability to reflect deeply. Tonight, he comes across as someone sensitive to the setbacks and problems inherent in the manner the anti-open grazing bills are being enacted. And to that extent, I share some common grounds with him. We are all devastated by the herdsmen problems, the clashes, the bloodshedding. We all want it to stop. We find no justification for that. At the same time, the bill being enacted into law, as we are seeing them, are problematic. They are filling a hole, they're digging up a hole to fill a hole. The only solution is a response from the federal government that shows serious commitment. There has to be some support for the herdsmen, certainly. But also, Mohammed will agree that some of our problems today is not just because of destruction of farmland, the unpleasant sight of cattle in the streets, interruption of traffic flow. That's not just that. The worst part of this herdsman problem is that somebody, somehow, within their midst, happens to wield AK-47, resulting in attacks on villages, resulting in killings of people in the night, resulting in kidnapping and raping and violence. These are not the normal kind of conflict you will expect between a herdsman whose herds entered in farmland or a farmland resisting cows in his farmland. No, these are more serious problems. If the herdsman did not have, by the way, I will say this, herdsmen have been moving around in Nigeria. 30 years ago, I knew they were moving around. The only thing different now than 30 years ago was 30 years ago, they did not have guns. They did not attack villages. They did not raise villages. There were no cases of rape. Now we have these cases. So probably it's not just a question of herdsmen moving around. It's a question of criminality. It was because the federal government of Nigeria failed to address these problems that people resorted to extreme measures. So yes, Mohammed says that he hasn't seen the government supporting open grazing. Well, the federal government has been supporting open grazing. You can support something by omission. You can support something by doing nothing about it. The fact that the federal government has not come up with any effective measure against the menace attributed to the cattle herdsmen suggests that the federal government is satisfied with the situation. So when people say they support it by indifference. They support it by inactivity. They support it by omission. They support it by looking the other way. They support it by failure to protect the victims. To protect the victims on both sides. So what are we going to do? The solution is still going to lie largely in federal government of Nigeria coming in to take a clear, fair, effective position. The federal government's silence is tearing the country apart. It is setting the states against the states. It's creating a faction between the southern states and northern states. That divide ought not to exist. That is a very terrible thing for this country, because for the people of the South, if you support open grazing, or if you seem indifferent about it, that means you are supporting the killing of the people in the South. But for the people in the North, the Fulani people, who are legitimate part of this country, we must admit it, they are part of Nigeria. So if you take a measure that is drastic, they are going to interpret it on an ethnic basis as well, because it affects their interest. So this is the consequence of failure of the federal government to take a position which will be unifying, which will be fair, which will be even-handed across the nation, so that you don't have one ethnic group accusing the other ethnic group. He asked me, Mohammed asked if I was aware of any bill from the federal legislature. No. And that is my concern, that the Senate and the House of Rep in Nigeria are sitting on their arms, leaving it for the states to protect themselves. And the states are not in the best position to do so. However, the states must act if the federal government doesn't act. So what we are seeing today across the southern states is the inevitable reaction of state governments who could no longer fold their arms and watch as their citizens perish in these senseless killings. It's a political reality. If you're a governor of a southern state and you don't do something now, you cannot win elections. It is the failure of the governors of the eastern states to act sooner that gave vent and strengthened the message of IPOB. Indeed, the herdsmen issue became a recruiting miracle for IPOB. They point at it. They say herdsmen are taking our land. The rationale for the idea of ESN was the herdsmen. Whether it was exaggerated or not, it is the consequence of failure of the federal government to anticipatorily deal with these problems before they got to the point where they got. Okay, the governors in the South, because the southern state governors are facing pressure from two ends. If the governors remain gentle and fail to do something, you're going to have IPOB spring up, you're going to have Ugwuonye men spring up. All these are responses to the failure of governance at the federal level and at state level. So when you look at what the states are doing, Mohammed, I hope you're listening to me, because when you look at the reactions of it, put yourself in the position of a state governor. You want to be gentle, you want to be slow about it, And you have groups within your state demanding secession, demanding breakup of the country, accusing the governors of complicity and indifference. As a governor, you're going to act. And that's what's happening in the southern states. The federal government forced them, created a situation where you have all these disorganized, non-coordinated, and contradictory reactions by way of anti-open grazing bills and laws. Because it's not enough to make law. You can make law, but you have to get to the stage of implementation of the law. I was listening to the speech of the governor of Ebonyi State. He was more concerned now about making sure that the law is enforced. So it's no longer enough to have a law. It's not a problem dealing with enforcement. How are you going to deal with the enforcement? Nigerian police is a federal entity. We don't have state police yet, really. So when the governor says we want to make sure that anti-grazing bill is enforced, he will ultimately be using federal agency to enforce a law that the federal government is actually impliedly opposed to. It's a very unfortunate situation we are in this country. I blame it on the federal government. That is the way it will work, for the federal government to come up and address in a holistic manner, even-handed manner, that balances all the equities on this issue of cattle rearing in Nigeria, and the ranches and the restrictions on grazing. There must be restrictions on grazing. We've got to do that, but we must deal with all the necessities, all the essential factors.
Okay, thank you so much, Barrister. Remember that you can join this conversation simply by raising up your digital hand. And our time is fast spent, so if you're going to join the conversation, I would advise that you do that now. Let's go back to Comrade Mohammed. Comrade Mohammed, are you there?
Yes, I'm there. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, no, just before you react to what he said, I want to ask you a question also. Now that it's an agreement that the southern governors have to do something to protect life and property in their states, and it's also seen that northern governors forum have also come out to say, okay, yes, the open grazing is not sustainable. Let us allow for ranching system. Don't you think that both the southern and the northern governors are saying the same thing but in two different languages? Do you agree with this?
Actually, they are saying almost the same thing. I don't know if you've watched an interview with Governor El-Rufai of Kaduna State. I think it is yesterday or the day before yesterday. He said he needs about 13 to 14 billion naira to fund cattle ranches, 14 cattle ranches across the state. And he is willing to do that because he knows its economic viability. But in the case of the southern governors, despite the fact that these Fulanis are Nigerians, they are not willing to reciprocate, even though they are going to benefit directly from these resources. So I see it actually differently. Best is that to establish a cattle ranch is not a day's job. It requires massive funding and research. One cannot just raise up it in a single day and establish one without undertaking research. So I insist that there is need for government intervention. When it is left as a laissez-faire, both parties will not experience efficiency. So I am seeing it actually in a different manner. The southern governors are not, interested in investing on the cattle ranching business. And asking these Fulanis to vacate the south is something very difficult and delicate at this point in time.
Let me interject here, Comrade Mohammed. Comrade Mohammed, forgive me, let me interject here. Do you blame the southern governors for not being invested in cattle rearing? considering the fact that some headsmen have taken it upon themselves to enter into farmlands and kill people indiscriminately? Do you really blame them for trying to protect their citizens against this, in quotes, invasion in their lands?
Look, you see, sometimes I don't even believe people saying that this Fulani entered into farms and killed people indiscriminately. This is not fair to these people. They have an element of humanity in them. There is no way they can just enter your farm directly, eat all your crops, and kill you or enter, it is something actually disturbing. However, it may happen in some instances, but not in all cases. Why is it that this is not replicating in northern Nigeria, where we have abundance of these cattle rearers? This is a question we need to ask ourselves. We also have some issues, certain issues of that nature, but it is not in most cases. What usually happens is that when these people commit that act once or twice, whenever they are seen in the state, they are being attacked. So they have to develop means of protecting themselves. The barrister said something that she generalized, which I don't believe in that these Fulani are wielding armed machines. You cannot generalize the action of 15% of people in the entire population on 100%. Just because 15% of these Fulanis are criminal doesn't guarantee you to generalize their action on the entire population. We have standard, or is it a standard of significance, even on research, where you have 5%, 1%, and I think 10% maximum only in social sciences. So you cannot generalize. Something has to be at least 90% accurate before you can generalize. So there is this, way of thinking. People,
Mohammed, point of correction. Point of correction. I did not generalize. I said that among them, from their midst, came people wielding guns and AK-47. I was very careful. I used the word amongst them. So invariably, even if it is 1% or 10%, it is 10% of their group, which you agree. But I did not generalize, just to make sure that is emphasized. I said among them, attributed. I also said attributed to them, which is very important, careful use of word. The violence attributed to them, and amongst them are those who wield weapons and engage in these violence. I did emphasize that.
Okay, thanks for the correction. However, the actions of those people among them cannot be generalized on the entire population. So in taking decision or deciding on bills to implement, we need to be considerate of the others. That's why I am suggesting the cattle ranching system across the nation. So that is what I think we need to work on. So now the barrister said something on the IPOB. I think the IPOB are hiding behind the veil of these herdsmen to perpetuate criminal activities. Not that they are directly against these herdsmen. The IPOB degenerate from the Biafra agitations. And this Biafra agitations has been in Nigeria since 1960s. So it doesn't start today just because of the herdsmen clash. They are hiding behind that to just perpetrate criminal activities. How can an organization that is fighting hardest lock down entire region for a day, halt all economic activities, and even try to execute some people for bypassing their order. And you think that
Comrade Mohammed, please, I'll ask that we don't deviate the topic. Let us stick to the topic. When we want to talk about IPOB, we will talk about IPOB, but let's not deviate. Thank you so much.
I did that because
and now I am going to call on some participants that have their hands up. Elder Tango Ugochukwu, please, your hand is up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I've been listening for a time now. Good day, good night, good afternoon. Anyway, we are around the globe. Very interesting story. Enhancement, plan enhancement have been existing. I'm in my mid-60s, and I know plan enhancement for a long time. They are not violent people, but this today enhancement is another. Colonel Saeed has said these people are all Nigerians. They are not all Nigerians. The evidence they are not all Nigerians. They are intruders. They even accept that they are intruders. They came in, most of them. And Chief Emeka Ugwuonye have said something good, that these people are armed, creating violence. So defending them doesn't call for. And condemning IPOB or no IPOB, without IPOB, our governors did nothing, our leaders did nothing, and the killing continues. Threatened provocation. You invaded somebody's farm, you destroyed the farm, and you are armed at the same time, and the person who destroyed his farm is not armed. But let us be honest ourselves. So there is really cause for all this agitation. When things move normal, a normal human being will not get up, continue agitating for fun's sake. Another issue I have to put clear is that these Fulani herdsmen are creating havoc. And the federal government have no God or anything, morale to say these people are terrorists, or they are doing it. People with the flag, IPOB was campaigning with only flag or demonstrating. He labeled the terrorists. They are terrorists, they are this. But people with AK-47 who can stand a war against anybody, against any yeah, they are not terrorists. So there's double standard in everything. Let us call it a spade a spade. There's double standard. And this today modern world, on 21st century, people are talking how to score modern goal. We're talking of open grazing. Meat, even this open grazer cannot make the cow healthy, cannot produce more meat. It can even have more meat, even in an acre of land. You train cow normally, you produce more meat than the one moving around the bush, disturbing, creating havoc. Nowhere in the world is practiced again. So we must reason. And you are talking to support Fulani herdsmen. Motopass seller needs support. Carpenter needs support. Vulcanizer needs support. Welder needs support. So that's what we got.
Elder, I'll go to go. Sorry. We are almost out of time, so I would ask you to please summarize.
Okay, my summarize is that federal government will live up to expectation. Do the right thing. This open grazing will not work. Nobody will take it. If they force it on people, they're creating more havoc. Let them plan a way that these people will either they create a school for them learn modern breeding of animal or modern handling of animal. So they will have more animal and have their peace, and other people will have their peace. This is my take.
Thank you so much. I saw Obieze Joao Okechukwu's hand up. I don't know if you're still interested in making a contribution. So I don't think he is. So let's go to Charles. Charles, I can see your hand up.
Yeah. Good evening, everybody. Are you hearing me?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. The contribution I want to make is an advisory to Comrade Mohammed. What I have observed is that there seems to be a cover-up, a cover-up of the, I have read, I listened to your contribution, and I have read severally. I have never seen fellow Fulanis condemning the criminal Fulanis. You see, in every group, there must be Judas, there must be criminal elements. But it is important that those criminal elements are identified and not hidden because we share the same tribe. Just like the last speaker said, most of them are foreigners who came. Yes, they are Fulanis, but they are foreigners from other countries. They may share tribal affinity, but that does not mean that you should allow them to come to the country, your country, and make nonsense of all the relationship. By the way, there is no any time the tribe Fulani has been demarcated than this very period in our history. And then when you talk about Fulani, you talk about power, you talk about influence. But today, when you talk about Fulani, you talk about violence, you talk about kidnapping, raping. Now, that is not how a tribe should allow criminal elements to destroy its very image. What we are looking for is peace. I schooled with one Fulani man, one Fulani young boy in my secondary school, back there in Owerri. We schooled together. His name is Sani. Him and his parents have been living in my village for more than 60 years. There is peace, there is love, there is unity. The Fulani that we know are peaceful, loving people. But how come, for one reason or the other, you allow these criminal elements to come from the country to come and spoil your own country? I think that the leadership of the Fulanis must think twice again and see how to reverse this dangerous order. And by the way, there is so much wealth. Holland produces meat, dairy only. That's one of their major exports. And they are earning billions of dollars from it. And if the leadership of the Fulanis should embrace ranching, I'm sure that the economic fortune of the entire North will be overwhelming. Now, God bless that region, but the leaders don't know how to harness it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Charles. Let us listen to Comrade Mohammed. Comrade Mohammed, are you there?
I'm with you.
Okay, you heard what they said. Can you react before we go to Barrister?
Yes. He said that he had never had a fellow Fulani condemning a criminal Fulani, which I think is not being objective in that. What is currently happening in northern Nigeria has tripled in multiple times the number of what is happening in the southern states. When last did you visit the north, if I may ask a rhetorical question? But if you've never visited the north, then you ask someone the sum of the negative atrocities we the northerners are faced by these Fulanis on daily basis. They have their accounts. Some local government are even under their control. It's a no-go area for people like me. So we are quite worried with the situation. But what we are saying is that it shouldn't be generalized while we are here suffering in the hand of these bandits. And when we go to the south, we should also experience the same. Or some of the good people among the Fulani you made mention that are not criminals should be made to suffer the consequences of the criminal Fulanis. This is what we are saying no to. But on daily basis, we are condemning their atrocities. And we look to any leak or link that we can, arrest these people and hand them over to the police. That's why I am also proposing for the ban of the open grazing system. Hope, you've said something which is quite interesting, that in the past, we once have Fulanis across the nation that are very peace-loving, very accommodating. But now we lack that trust. We lack those people in substantial number, although there are still some. So that is the thing we need to consider. What were the causes of these, uprisings? What are the causes of these security challenges across the nation? I will believe if you say our government has not done anything in terms of improving the security architecture of the federation. This is all over. That's why we are having the IPOP. That's why we are having the Odudua agitators. That's why here in the north, we are ravaged by Boko Haram. We are ravaged by the banditry caused by the Fulani. So every region has its peculiar problems in terms of security challenges. But we shouldn't be labeling it against a particular tribe. Labeling the act of banditry against the entire Fulani is just like saying one certain group, ethnic group, is in charge of selling fake drugs or counterfeit drugs in the nation, which is not true. So we should think twice in whatever we are going to utter, just like what the barrister says. So a stitch in time saves time. That's my take. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We are rounding up now, and I'll give it to Barrister. I'm going, Barrister.
Yes.
Okay, you have had the participants and Comrade.
I heard what the last contributor said, and also what Comrade Sani Mohammed said. We are in sync. I think, there is no difference in substance. We all agree that the menace, the violence has to be stopped. We all agree that the government has to do more. One thing I had always known, but which Mohammed emphasized, is that when you look at the violence wreaked across the country, it is not correct to think that the northern part of Nigeria are living in peace, enjoying themselves, and that the havoc is restricted to the southern part. They are suffering. If you tell me, in reality, the north has suffered far more than the south as a result of the consequences of this violence, Boko Haram, the banditry, and all that. So we need cool-headed policymakers, preferably at the federal government level, to move faster, to move more comprehensively, to tame the crisis. If they don't do that, it's only when the federal government fails, that you have sporadic, non-coordinated, inefficient reactions by the states, as we're seeing across the board. Alternatively, at even a worse level, you will have responses and reactions by various separatist groups that are ravaging the country. The critical thing that Sani agreed and I agreed is that the violence has to stop. It can't continue. Open grazing is not sustainable and shouldn't continue. I believe that we made much progress. I was expecting a stronger disagreement in today's discussion. Given my friend, my comrade, I believe he was going to represent one side and I the other side, but that divide did not occur. We have several common grounds. We just need to have focused, efficient governance to address this security crisis in this country. That is my take. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And that brings us to the end of our discussion today. We have been discussing under the theme Anti-grazing Bill, pros, cons, and controversies surrounding the policy. Special thanks to our guest in the house. We had Emeka Ugwuonye. He is the president, Eculaw Group founder and CEO, Due Process Advocates International Foundation. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
And we also had the National Organizing Secretary of the Social Change Initiative, Comrade Sani Mohammed. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much.
And now I am going to hand over to Mr. Elumba for an informal chat. Mr. Elumba, I don't know if you want to have an informal chat today.
Yes, thank you very much. If you can, I want to ask a few questions that will not be recorded. So if we can just stop streaming at the moment. Please, why are we stopping the streaming? Okay. Sorry, gentlemen, let me